Hello everyone, thanks for joining the cycle of webinars #We Dare to Share. Allow me to start by saying that it is truly a privilege to be able to be here and share some of my beliefs and practices with all of you. My name is Cristina Batista and I'll be your host today. Our session is entitled Mind the Map, and I will address mind mapping as a powerful way to boost our students' communication skills. Well, let's get started then, shall we? To begin, I have a question. Which gaps are there in your classroom? As we think about this, I'm sure that attention is one of the first words that you think about. As teachers, we know that we must grab our students' attention alongside with their motivation to ensure that things go the right way. Other than that, I'd say that communication is also something we really need to consider because we need to get our message across a gap here, and that may be difficult if we have a group of people that are either not paying enough attention, not clearly motivated, or not able to fully understand what we're talking about. Apart from that, naturally that each group has their own difficulties, each student can be better at this skill and not so good at that one, and those are clearly going to be major gaps inside our classroom that we need to take into account. So, what do we do when it comes to bridging those gaps? How can we act? What should we address when it comes to trying to be closer and trying to make sure that what we believe to be something rather negative, which would be a gap or something non-existent in the classroom, can actually be made better or turned into something at the end kind of positive for all of them? Well, we have to bear in mind that they need to be focused. Teenagers these days are used to having plenty of distractors all around them. They're used to accessing information in a rather easy way and are not ready to be focused on task for a long period of time. So we have to find a way to ensure that they learn the best way possible and to keep their attention on us or on the task for as long as we can. And that is important when considering what to do to overcome these issues that we may find in our own classrooms. Plus, if you think about it, if the teenager or a younger student eventually is not fully engaged and is not made to face challenges, then he probably will find it difficult to actually focus and eventually at the end to learn something that is meaningful to them. So what I aim to do today by talking to you is showing you how using mind maps in our activities can actually help us bridge these gaps that we often have. And so mind mapping will be looked into as a powerful tool to ensure that they learn the best way possible. Well, a mind map being a way of structuring ideas and making them work somehow, works, as we said right now, with ideas. And of course, for that, we need a bit of creativity. And that sometimes is kind of difficult, depending on the type of group that we're working with. So clearly, allowing students to think and to get structured in terms of what's on their minds is a way to boost their creativity, to make them exercise their brain in the sense that they have to come up with different colors for something, to be more creative, to actually allow their minds to follow some patterns, yes, but also to come up with things on their own. We also know that if I want to gather ideas and to get information that makes sense, I should, of course, write it down or keep it someplace. Well, if I find a way to allow those ideas to have a structure, starting from eventually a broader idea and then going into others, then I know that my students are going to retain that information in a much better way. And then later on, when they are exercising on either a test or whatever in terms of classroom that has to do with the topic that we worked with while providing an activity with mind mapping, we know that those concepts, those words, those phrases eventually will make sense on their mind when they need to use them within a slightly different context, for example. On the other hand, we also know that if we start with broad ideas and we ask them to structure them, they will probably be able to turn them into a bit more specific topics, and then in their minds, things will get more organized. They will start making more sense, and that will clearly lead to effective learning, because I want them to retain what we're working with and to be able to pick that information and actually use it within a different context whenever necessary later on in life, not just in the classroom, but also whenever they have a context in which they need to communicate, they need to understand others, and they need to express themselves in English as good as they can, naturally, you know, I'm not just thinking about traveling, but I'm thinking about other types of activities that they may want to engage in, and that will allow them to actually showcase their effective learning, and that can come from their experience with mind mapping as well. One of my favorites, I have to confess this, I have to say it, one of my favorite advantages relating to mind mapping is collaboration, because I truly believe that peer learning is key, it's crucial to allow students to be better communicators in the future. That is, often we think that if we get students to talk together and to spend time working on their own skills, you know, with each other, it might eventually not be the best option, or they might not be learning that much. We may actually question that. I think as a teacher, I used to do that until I actually saw that it really worked within a context. And what I think is that a weaker student can benefit from not feeling so exposed when talking to a classmate about a topic, or when asking for help while having to go through the filling in of a mind map about a certain topic, for example. And at the same time, they will be more prone to communicate better with classmates, to actually pitch in and say something in class, to be able to explore an idea and to, you know, expose themselves a bit more within the classroom and to say it out loud, because they have been working on that previously and they have some knowledge that they've acquired and that they're willing to share now. So this seems to me as something really important in terms of ESL classroom, naturally. Something else that we must consider when it comes to mind mapping is that as teachers, our role is to make students learn, right? I think we all agree on that. To find ways to allow them to reach a higher status in terms of knowledge. And so these steps that you can see there are like a symbol of the way that I want my students to progress in terms of language skills. And for that, scaffolding is essential. I have to find a way to structure their knowledge and to allow them to get better, you know, than they were before, naturally, but starting from things that are more common and familiar to them. And when we're building a mind map within a different theme, we can start by using words that they already know, and then step by step allow them to enrich their vocabulary and allow them to add more knowledge. For example, collaborating with peers when they actually are better and they know more words than the other ones. So there's different ways of going through scaffolding here, but it is essential that we bear in mind the need to start off from, you know, bottom up and to actually add more knowledge to what they already have on their minds. Something else that I find interesting when it comes to mind mapping activities is that we teachers may not be there in terms of activity, but our guidance is really important. I know that I can make a student think about a topic in a certain way and actually reach a specific conclusion and learn a lesson, maybe, well, who knows, a lifelong lesson sometimes, because I can guide them through the ideas that I want them to retain concerning a certain topic. Last but not least, I'd like to say that if we force students, so to speak, to go through an activity in which they have to share opinions and comment on a certain topic or answer a question or go through a set of images that are somehow organized and then get some vocabulary out of that, we are going to get students with broader perspectives at the end of the day. Because the fact that they talk together about things is going to make them naturally better, and it's going to allow them to look at things from another set of eyes, which is the one from the classmate, for example, or anyone in their class, and eventually even the teacher. But considering this idea of peer learning as well, I think that this is a very good way to make them look at something that they believe to be in a certain way by exploring a different option and getting into some even really meaningful conclusions that will allow them to grow in a better way. Basically, what I'm saying is that with mind maps, we can bring order into chaos, and we know that when we start a topic or ask for a task that has to do with a topic, well, some of them are actually difficult for students, especially for teenagers, to grasp, and that might mean that out of those chaotic ideas that they may have, we tend to actually get them better organized and allow them to actually explore how they feel about the topics in a different way. Well, mind maps traditionally can be just something that you draw either on the board or on a sheet of paper, and then you can freely allow the student to actually retain vocabulary and use his or her own ideas. We can start off from an image or from a question, some sort of visual input that will allow them to start, thinking in their heads, what can I relate this to? And then actually get a lot more vocabulary, words, short phrases as well, to make sure they are more familiarized with the topic we want them to. We can also use online apps or websites that allow us to create mind maps as well, with different structures according to the type of topic that we're working with. Either way, we know that this activity is going to be highly motivating for our students because they will have the sense that they are building something. We also know that it's really versatile in the sense that I can use mind maps for almost any topic that I can think of. And still, it's going to make sense when they go back to their notebooks and look at that. That's going to be meaningful to them. Interactive, yes, also because we can actually engage plenty of them when we are building this as a class. And at the end of the day, they will retain this, and later on when they go back, it will make perfect sense because they were there as the structure was being built, so because they took part in the way that this was made, then it's going to make a lot more meaning to them later on. Okay, so why did we start this, if you remember, by talking about communication skills? Because that's crucial. That's what I want my students to be better at. I want them to be able to communicate better. And when I say communication skills, of course I cannot disregard the fact that speaking is really important. And to some students, it's a nightmare. You know that plenty of students, and we've all had our share of experience in different schools, in different contexts, but still many students today are afraid of speaking in English in front of a class or to the teacher or just to a classmate. So if I have this idea that they can think about this as something really overwhelming, really difficult, and they struggle, then why can't I provide them with something that will make them a bit more comfortable when they get to that point in which they do have to say something? So the fact that they may not have clear ideas or that they may just be afraid of expressing themselves, those two are really major gaps, I'd say, in our classrooms. And we can, with effective activities of mind mapping, allow some comfort and the idea that it's okay to say out loud what I've already filled in within my structured, map. And now I'm more than ready to share this with my classmates. Even a weaker student will probably be able to at least read 3 or 4 words within a context and feel that he was able to take part in the activity, and that it's surely going to, keep their motivation levels up and naturally allow learning to actually happen in the classroom. Well, when we talk about communication, we do talk about speaking, yes, but we must talk about writing as well. And then the problem of what should I write about? How am I supposed to do this? How am I going to fill in this blank page that my teacher has asked me to write? So this idea is also important to bear in mind, because we can address this by teaching students how to structure their ideas before starting to write a text, for example. So it's not just the collaboration here that makes sense, but it does, because if they get to exchange ideas and write them down first, then the text that they're going to write is going to be much better structured. Tendentially, it will have less repetitions. And then, of course, if they're doing this alongside with someone else, they can actually get better at their writing naturally. But what I mean is, if we teach them how to go through the proper structure before, we will clearly get much better results later when we're reading compositions or essays or whatever. So for sure, this is a really good thing that we should, use in our classrooms. And now you wonder, okay, that's all really interesting, but how do I do this? How can I make it work in my own classroom? So here's just a short example of something that you might eventually do. So one of the things that I like doing with my students whenever we're preparing a topic, or even, for example, before a test, when I know that they will have to write about a theme, then what we do is we build a mind map collaboratively normally, or if I want them to actually work in pairs, I may provide them with something like what you see there, a central question. In this case, I chose something to do with studying abroad, but it could be any topic you think of. So considering the question, why would you take part in an Erasmus program? Then I would provide them with 2, 3, 4 topics there, subtopics, and then allow them to think of something that they can add to this structure. So it's important, and from my viewpoint, naturally, it's important that we don't give them everything ready for them to talk about. It's important that we leave them with some aspects that we believe them to be able to express themselves and actually be a bit more creative too. It's more motivating this way. So as a speaking task, I would ask my students to talk together about this, to go through the prompts that are there and to actually add some information of their own according to what they believe. Eventually, after 2 or 3 minutes of interaction in pairs, I would ask them to decide and negotiate towards the idea of one being better than the rest and why. So making them negotiate towards a decision-making exercise as well. That's beneficial. Then how could I make this evolve into a writing task? Well, then after this, I would probably give them either a quote by someone that just went on the best trip of their lives when they were having a program in some far-off country, so that they can actually imagine a lifestyle very different from their own, or tell them that they have to pretend that they are there and that they have to write an email to a friend saying what they've been doing, expressing themselves, and actually using, for example, a minimum of 3 of the items that they've seen on this mind map within their own composition. So always taking the information that was provided before and asking them to use this as basis for the writing task that I want them to do later. Again, this is probably going to help them avoid repetition, which is, as you know, one of the things we get in compositions all the time, repeated ideas over and over. So if we get a better structure before, then we're surely going to get a text that makes much more sense at the end. Why not try it in your class and then letting us know? That would be good. And now, close to the end, I just like to leave you with something that I personally believe in, truly. And I've picked something from an ancient philosopher, not really from someone who is an expert on English language teaching techniques, whatever, because I think that it's about what we want our students to be, and not just the fact that we may give them information and expect them to make it work on their own. So my choice of quote for the day today is, "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be ignited." And I do dare you to ignite that fire in your students, because we wind up getting to see that they have so much more to give and they can be so much more colorful than we expect them to be. And that is a very good way to make learning meaningful and perspicuous and something that they will retain for the rest of their lives. So thank you so much for your time, and you are welcome to ask any questions you may have, even provide some feedback using the email english@porteditora.pt. Keep up your good work and have a wonderful day.